In the West, there are still a few good men left, men of God, like the circuit-riding preachers of old, proclaiming truth like the holy prophets of old, strong and bold. You're about to hear politically incorrect but biblically correct truth from circuit-riding preacher Peter Peters, whose home base is a radio ranch nestled in the Laramie River Valley near Laramie, Wyoming. The radio ranch is a working cattle and horse ranch where circuit-riding preacher Peter Peters broadcasts nightly worldwide on the Scriptures for America Worldwide Broadcasting Network, reaching the world through satellite, radio, television, shortwave, and the World Wide Web. Writing for the brand, he preaches for the man, Jesus Christ, the Son of God. His circuit not only includes a radio ranch outreach in Wyoming, but also the LaPorte Church of Christ, located at the base of the colorful Colorado Rocky Mountains in LaPorte, Colorado, where he has preached for over 30 years. The message is preached there by Dr. Peters on Sunday morning or streamed live on the internet and are archived at the ministry website, scripturesforamerica.org. Dr. Peters' politically incorrect but biblically correct sermons are available on CD and DVD. Many in America, Canada, and all over the world are on the free CD and DVD ministry. Our address will be given at the end of this broadcast. And now, here is Dr. and Pastor Peter John Peters with the Word of God.
Yesterday we talked about Asaka. We talked about Asaka and his invincible weapon. Today we're going to talk more about Asaka. Yesterday we talked about Asaka East. Today, Asaka West. I've got a great deal to cover. That would information that would ordinarily require books to discuss, and I'm going to try to squeeze it all in the limited time allotted to me. And I'm going to try to do it without making it gibberish, because it's a very, very simple lesson. Before a wolf can eat sheep, he must enter the sheepfold. If he cannot enter the sheepfold, he can't eat sheep. The wolf's problem is the eternal problem. There is a watchman, and there are rams. The watchman must be bribed to tell the sheep that the wolf really isn't a wolf. He's a different kind of sheep. A ram must be bribed to protect the wolf once he is in the sheepfold. Before a sheep can eat wool, before a wolf can eat sheep, he must enter the sheepfold. He must bribe the priest, and then he must bribe the king. Those two are must before he can trade. As a review, Alexander the Great invaded India in about 326 BC. He conquered India. Then he was forced to withdraw. The Indians got India back, and all the land taken and ruled by the Greeks were now ruled by Indian rulers. Asaka was the grandson of the Indian ruler who negotiated the Greeks out of India. He didn't fight the Greeks out of India and drive them out. He gave them 500 elephants to leave. And the Greeks left. Asaka invented a weapon with which to fight. He renounced war. His conquests were different from that time on. It is a weapon that we have yet to come to grips with. It's called Dharma Ahimsa. Alien names, strange names to us. Dharma, the duty of every man to his family, to his community, to his job, business, and to his ruler, the king. Ahimsa, non-violence. Neither in word or deed speak against another god. There must be peace in the land. Unless there is peace in the land, the wolf cannot go about and eat sheep. Dharma. All men are to worship gods. All men are to obey their rulers. All men are to be nonviolent and not speak against any other god. And then the wolf can go about and eat sheep. Dharma and Ahimsa. And then he instituted a group called the Dharma Matra. The Dharma Matra. They were PC enforcers, the politically correct enforcers. These people joined all religions, all political movements, all groups of any sort. They fully supported those groups, the religions and the politics and everything, except on 2 points. If they ever deviated from these 2 points, then they would kick up their heels. Dharma and Ahimsa. A group's duty to the king. He must be obedient to the king. He cannot break the law of the land. Second, Ahimsa, non-violence in either word or deed against another religion, against another belief. All gods are welcome. All gods are one God, the reincarnation of Brahma, Shiva, and Vishnu. All gods are to be honored. All gods are to be worshipped. Hinduism is a religion of kings. Kings tend to be Hindus because Hinduism makes it certain that he will stay in power indefinitely. That's why God told Israel, don't choose a king. If you choose a king, he will oppress you. He will take your daughters for bakers. He will take your sons for his armies. He will take your people to work for him. And he will take your lands and give them to his favorites. If you have a king, God told him not to have a king. King David is an example of what goes wrong when you get a king. Solomon is an example of what goes wrong. They did many things right. They were God's favorites. But they did wrong and evil. God appointed as kings his people as kings and priests. We have one king and one king only. And that is the Word. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us, Jesus Christ. Who's God? Jesus, the Word made flesh. Who is God? The Word. Our God is the Word. There is no deviation from the Word. Anything that deviates from the Word to us in a time of peril and strife is sacrilege. That's not so to other religions. Hinduism is the easier one. How can a rich man become rich? When to become rich often invites monopolies of one sort or another. How can a man have a monopoly of food, a monopoly of money making, a monopoly of usury, a monopoly of the monopolies that are usually needed to become rich? The rich man tends to do anything to increase his wealth. A man who comes from the Word, one of our people, who inherits great amount of money or makes a great amount of money, watch his change. Watch it. You can note his change. I went to church in my hometown with a preacher who's become famous. I knew him in the old days, and I know him now. The difference is wealth. When he became rich, he is 180 degrees from the way he started. He accepts things. He's tolerant of things that are condemned by the Word. This man sells bonds to his parishioners, making usurers of them. And what is the penalty for usury? Death. And he is the witness. Now, what is the penalty for a false witness? The same thing that the person who does the crime gets. This is a person who has two gods. What is the name of a person who has two gods? Hindu. We have Christian Hindus in our land who follow more than one God. If our God does not let him do it, they'll take on another God that will let him do it. He calls himself a Judeo-Christian. He admits it. He will not tolerate criticism of anyone else's belief in that church. This is Dharma Ahimsa in our land. It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. That is not a parable. It is a fact. How many millionaires do you see in our midst? How many will you ever see? I get an outpouring of people requesting information from our prisons, the poor of the poor, the people who have nothing. I get letters that come from prisons from more knowledgeable than anything I've ever seen on the outside. They teach me. They study, they learn in the prisons. And so many of them there are prisoners in the American prisons, the American Hindu prisons, for not violating any law of God. But they're in prison. And in prison, they study the Word. Why study the Word? Because they hope that one day, when they come out, that the Word will be enforced in their land. And they will be separated unto their own people. Alexander the Great took back with him to India, Dharma Ahimsa. He took it back to Greece. The Greeks accepted the Hindu idea of Dharma and Ahimsa. Homosexuality to us is a crime. It's a capital crime. But to other religions, it's a part of their religion. If practicing homosexuality is practicing a religion, can a Hindu criticize homosexuality? Is he allowed to do it under Ahimsa and Dharma? Are you allowed? Is the legal system allowed to raise his hand against the homosexual? It is not allowed. It would be irreligious. It would be against the religions. What is one man's religion may be another man's curse. Homosexuality and usury moved into Greece. Usury is permitted to certain gods. It is forbidden by our God. But do we have usury in the land? We have the prohibition against usury, and we have usury. We have two gods in our land. I know cannot what God you choose, but choose your God and follow him. That was written in the scriptures. Do we have taxes? Taxes are forbidden to kings and priests. The kings and priests of this land, the government, and the churches, they pay no taxes. God appointed you, kings and priests. Do you pay taxes? Who rules the land? Do the Hindus rule the land, or does the Word rule the land? The Episcopal government, the church government, from the top down, it destroyed Greece. You have a king at the top, and the rich at the top. And the real kings and priests appointed by God at the very bottom, they're the slaves. It destroyed Greece. It destroyed it. people ceased to exist in Greece. It moved into Egypt, tolerance, the tolerance of those things that would destroy you. It destroyed Egypt. It destroyed Persia, the mighty Persian Empire. They became tolerant of all the religions and all their ways of doing things. Now, we are talking about destroying empires and millions and tens and hundreds of millions of people and destroying them all. I was writing a book about the 6 invasions of the West, talking about the Hun invasion, talking about killing 500,000 people in one battle, talking about the Mongol invasions and how the armies were organized and how they did the Turkic invasion, the Arab invasion of Spain, the Ottoman invasion of Austria. Peanuts. We are talking about Asaka's invincible weapon, Dharma and Ahimsa. The weapon that's not tanks and not airplanes, not submarines or battleships. We stand ready to defend our borders, but the tanks don't come, the planes don't come, the armies don't come. Ahimsa and Dharma comes. Tolerance, and our land is destroyed before our eyes. Asaka belief of Ahimsa and Dharma moved west. There was a king, a very corrupt king. The land at that time, there had been a rabble-rouser born 300 years previously, and he had brought the word. He had brought the word again and revived it into a land consumed with Hinduism, consumed with the filth of homosexuality and usury and all the naked Olympic type games that they had there in Jerusalem, where people threw the discus and all these things as a religious thing to their gods. Naked. Homosexuality was everywhere. He brought the word into that land. And in 300 years' time, trade was becoming impacted in the Roman Empire. The people demanded their own land. They demanded that taxes cease. So something had to be done about it. Before a wolf can enter a sheepfold, he must first bind the watchman or replace him, and he must have rams who will protect him. This person, 300 years after Jesus, founded a new religion, or he made the existing religion the religion of the state. But he himself was the head of it. This man's name was Constantine. He had murdered his wife. He had murdered his son. He himself didn't accept this new religion. Not until he was on his deathbed did he accept this religion. He approved this gin flavor. Gin flavor is emperor worship. And who did they worship? They worshiped Constantine. He approved that. He is the father of organized religion today. The first thing they did was to pass a law forbidding people to read the Word. Now let's look at some of the rituals of this new religion and see where you have heard of them before. There was a great deal of ritual. The priests wore robes. They marched in procession. In their temples they used incense. They shaved their heads. The priests were celibate. They had monasteries and nunneries. They used chants. Works were very important. One must have good works. They used robes and idols throughout their temples of worship. They accepted all comers, and no one was criticized or left out. The priests were tax exempt. They sent missionaries in all the known world. They used holy water. They had an episcopal priesthood appointed by the king. The king was Constantine, and he appointed men like himself. They had saints. They went on pilgrimage. When he died, he made a bequest to his church. Do you remember Osaka's bequest yesterday? Where Osaka left 1,000 million gold pieces to the temple and the priest, the Hindu priest. Constantine left all the lands, all the businesses, and all the wealth of the Roman Empire to the church, who from that time owned the whole world. It was the Catholic Church. In Europe itself was owned by the Hindu religion, Christian Hindu religion. In the East, they had what was known as the Dalai Lama, the head of the church. In the West, they had what was known as the Pope, the head of the church. The Pope appointed kings. We think of kings as Charlemagne. We think of the great kings as Richard the Lionheart, of William the Conqueror, as being great men. We forget that they were appointed, that they could not go to war without permission from the Pope, that all the lands belonged to the Pope, that they were the hired rams used to protect the Pope's holdings and to collect tithes and to collect rents and to protect his businesses. That's what the kings were. The church is taught two things: Dharma and Ahimsa. The duty to God and man, and Ahimsa, nonviolence in word or act against the church or their rulers. This is what is called as feudalism. It is looked up to in the history books. We think of the knights charging about the fields of battle. We think of the flags flying and the knights jousting. But this is how it worked. It was Constantine's bequest. The church owned it all. The church approved of the king. The king appointed the nobles of counties and so forth. The nobles appointed their knights. Under them all were the people. The great cathedral that we see that cost unlimited amounts of money in that day and time, you would have a village of hovels where the people, the kings and priests appointed by God, lived as virtual slaves. And then you had this enormous edifice in the middle of it, the cathedral, where all the business took place. That was your feudalism. And from here on, the history is a record of God's people attempting to separate themselves and be separate. Within the Catholic Church, there have always been priests who have known the truth and have taught the truth. And whenever they taught the truth, it caused problems. In northern Italy, the people rose up, and the Catholic Church sent armies and exterminated them. In southern France, the people learned the truth, and they rose up, and the Catholic Church sent armies and exterminated them. In England, there was a man named Wycliffe. And this man named Wycliffe was a priest who was a knowledgeable priest. And we have a problem between the Pope and the king. The king is the Pope's agent to rule the land for the church. But the king did not like collecting tithes and offerings from the people and sending it overseas. And he wanted to keep it all. And this Wycliffe worked for the church. But the king said that if he would come out and prove that the king didn't have to obey the Pope, then he could go ahead and write the Bible or translate the Bible. So fine. As long as he was protected by the king against the Pope's troops, fine. Against the Dhammamatras. So we have a falling out at the top between the new watchman, the Pope, and the ram who protects his interest, the king. And the king protected Wycliffe, and Wycliffe wrote a Bible, the Wycliffe Bible, and it got around among the common people. And the common people read the Bible, and they learned their rights, and they learned that they were kings and priests, and they were not supposed to pay taxes, and the land was to be divided among them, and never ever sold. If it was not sold, what is the church doing owning our land? What's the king doing owning our land? Why aren't a king and a priest on my own land, tax-free? Why do I have to pay taxes to the king? Why do I have to pay taxes to the church? When people learn their rights, that's trouble. There was a peasant revolt. Virtually overnight, 60,000 peasants rose. And I say peasants, there were nobles among them who knew the truth, who had learned it. And there were only a handful of priests who spread the word. Most all the priests were with the establishment. That's the way it always is. The priests are always with the establishment. That's what they're paid to do. It could not be otherwise. But when the people, the kings and priests, learned their rights, given them by God, they revolted. And they went against the king, and they almost succeeded in the 1300s. Almost. But they were overwhelmed by treachery. You're not supposed to negotiate, especially the matters of God. They tried to negotiate with the rulers, and the rulers killed them by treachery, and then the bloodletting started. Okay, you want me to continue? Our God is not Dharma and not Ahimsa. Murder, homosexuality, and kidnapping is permitted by many religions. We condemn that. Our God is a violent God. A murderer is to be put to death. A kidnapper is to be put to death. Homosexuals are to be put to death. This is violence. This violates Dharma and Ahimsa. Our God is not a peaceful God. He is a violent God. Wycliffe's Bible unleashed the violence. And then they put the lid on it. And there was peace for 100 years or so. And then a man had the identical same situation. There was a falling out between the princes of Germany and the Pope. And a man offered to write a Bible telling the world that the kings were more entitled to the rents and privileges than the Pope. So the kings agreed to protect this man while he wrote a Bible to prove his point. The man's name was Martin Luther. Martin Luther wrote a Bible protected by the kings against the priest. When the Bible got out and people read the Bible in German, there was a peasants' revolt that was joined in by the knights, unemployed knights from all over Germany, and it was touch and go whether they would succeed or not. Finally, in a bloodbath, they finally crushed it down. The people demanded that the land be divided, that every man have his own kingdom on land that was never ever to be sold, never ever to be taxed. Land on which he was to be buried, his followers were to be buried, his children forever were to be buried. His land as kings and priests to be ruled by themselves under God's law with one king, not two, one king, the Word. That's what happens when the Word is leashed. People heard their rights, and there was a great revolt suppressed in blood. In France, the identical same thing happened. There was a group of people known as Huguenots. They read the Bible. They believed the Bible. They formed their own communities. They came out from among them. There were Huguenot communities. They believed that they weren't to be taxed. They believed that they were to own their own lands. And the king wasn't supposed to own it all, and the church wasn't supposed to own it all. And they almost ruled France. And the king of France had to do something because his kingdom was being divided. And certainly the Catholic Church had to do something because they were liable to lose half of France like this. So this was the plan. The Huguenots, that's the name of the people who believed the Word, had a leader who had been an admiral in the French Navy. And the French king agreed to marry his sister to this admiral, who was the head of the Protestant forces. And just before the wedding, the word went out by the Catholics in the Catholic Church to kill all Protestants on St. Bartholomew's Day. On that first day in Paris alone, 50,000 Protestant men, women, and children were killed. And it spread throughout all the provinces of France. My wife is Huguenot. The Huguenots fled, those who were still alive, to Germany. Many Germans, I've heard estimates as high as perhaps a fifth of all Germans are French. Huguenots. They went to South Africa. Virginia is full of Huguenots. They struck a medal, the Catholic Church struck a medal commemorating the massacre of the Huguenots. Hinduism does not tolerate separatism. Hinduism is a gathering inward, a gathering together, a pulling together. The Word demands separatism, to pull apart, to get away from, so that we are not contaminated with other gods and other religions and other peoples who follow those gods. And then Calvin and John Knox, they went to Geneva. Knox was driven out of England for his heresy in preaching the Word. Calvin was driven out of France for his heresy in preaching the Word. In Geneva, Switzerland, a little city-state, they wrote a Bible called the Geneva Bible. And it spread particularly in the British Isles. The ships used to come at night, but they didn't carry whiskey and guns, they carried Bibles. And early in the morning, the ships would run aground in the fog, and the crates would be unloaded and taken over to waiting carts. And the horses would gallop off down the road carrying Bibles. And before the sun came up, they had been distributed in all the farmhouses and hidden under hay. And they were sold under the counter. They cost an arm and a leg then, they cost an arm and a leg now. But it taught the Word. The Word was loose in the land. And what followed? The great revolts of Scotland. John Knox, Calvinism, swept England. The great wars that followed, toppled the king. Our people enforced the law and rewrote the laws of the land for the first time in 1,000 years in the British Isles. Britain was on the way, all of Britain was on the way to becoming a land of the Word. And then Adamamatra earned his fate. We have Oliver Cromwell stepped in and betrayed them all. Since that time, we've had a reversion to Hinduism. The word that was almost over was clamped back, and we were put back in a box where the word is not taught, the word is not heard. And the people who don't know the word and don't know their rights are slaves. They are powerless to do anything. The King James Version of the Bible came out, leaving out the notes that were in the Geneva Bible, the notes that caused all the problems. And the Geneva Bible was suppressed. Then we had religions coming out like the Unitarian group in America that accepts all gods and all religions and all people. We have one God. What are the believers in this one God when all gods are the same? It's called Hindu. Then we have the thing, the cant that the law is done away. That swept the land. It's always swept the land. It is a divisive thing. If the law is not done away, it means the law is in effect. If the law is in effect, it means that you must be separate. If you must be separate, it means a tearing apart of the Hindu religion and the Hindu beliefs. It cannot be allowed. The law must be suppressed. The religious organizations are Episcopal from the top down. The Catholic Church, the bishops are appointed. The Episcopal Church, the bishops are appointed. They appoint the priest all the way down. The Methodist Church, the bishops are appointed. They appoint priests all the way down. Even the Lutheran Church has their bishops who appoint their priests all the way down. This is the residue of Hinduism. We, kings and priests, are living under the remnants of Hinduism. We see the oppression that is going on in the land. We know the problems we have. We know to avoid the rich man. It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. Why? Because a rich man, in order to keep what he's got and to add on to it, will break the law. He will no longer be separate. He will accept things that the word forbids. In time, he's a Hindu, calling himself a Christian Hindu. Rich man. Beware. I used to work for a conservative organization in Virginia. We were fighting the federal takeover of schools. I went over the state of Virginia. I met most everyone, I think. We have an awful lot of poor people. We have lots of people who work for themselves in their own businesses. I remember one or two rich people. And I remember what their contributions were. One man contributed $35. I remember that. Another man contributed $2,000 when we really needed it. Back there in the 50s, that was a great deal of money. The 50s and 60s. But it was peanuts. On a scale of giving, the little people gave the widow's mite time and time again. That revolt almost took Virginia. The word almost took Virginia. And Dharma Ahimsa, elected governor, promised that he would lead the way. And when he was elected, he gave us all. He turned us all over to the enemy, the politician. The ram that was supposed to protect us was in the pay of the wolf. And that has been the story all along. But we forget that we are kings and priests. Beware the rich man. He will tend to turn from the word, given time, in order to increase his wealth. Monopoly, trade with strangers, and toleration of lawlessness. It has always been the way. Now, what is our law might be, a violation of our law might be another person's religion. TV nudity and sex that you see on television that's utterly repulsive is a basic Hindu concept in the worship of Lord Siva. The phallic symbol is the symbol of the worship of Siva. To criticize TV nudity and sex is to show yourself as anti-religious. Is to show yourself a rebel. Is to show yourself anti-Dharma. Horoscopes. Our word tells us have nothing to do with horoscopes and Ouija boards and tarot cards and mediums. It is forbidden. The penalty is what? Death. Do we have Ouija boards, tarot cards, horoscopes in the newspapers? It is a requirement of other people's religion. To criticize horoscopes is to criticize another person's religion and is a violation of Dharma and Ahimsa. We have our religious leaders who have been made religious leaders by the media which is owned by the Hindu. They have selected their opposition. We know their names. One has strangers from the pulpit. Another is in usury. Another is an outright thief in jail right now. We have another caught fornicating with women time after time. And this is used as an example of the separatist Christian religion. To us, these are Christian Hindus. They follow more than one God. If their God will not allow them to do a certain thing, they will take on another God that will. If a God will not allow usury, they'll take on another God that will allow them usury. If one God will not allow sex, then another God will allow him promiscuous sex. If one God will not allow homosexuality, then another God will allow it. If you have more than one God, you have what? Hinduism, Christian Hindus. If a person cannot sell to enough people, he will sell to all strangers. If the God will not allow it, he will go to a God that does. He will either go to a known God or will make himself a God. And then he'll have two gods. He is a Hindu. Anyone who has more than one God practices Hinduism. We have swords, tanks, and planes. They have Dharma and Ahimsa. Our enemy, our direct enemy, who's right in here today, is the Dharma Matra. Everything we say will be reported. That's his job. He will be the one that will stand up and he will say that violation of the word where we separate it or where we use violence in word or deed is wrong, even if it is correct according to the word. Our weapon is the word. What are our rights? The land is to be divided. No taxes. There are no strangers to be had in our midst unless we learn their ways. We want a lawful society that go by the law. We want to be self-sufficient. No monopolists. The time will come. Years ago, I gave a talk on grass will grow on rate 81. You watch it. The day will come when the 18-wheeler will not roll. And all the goods that it takes that put other people out of business will not happen. And you'll have a self-sufficient farm. Your own kingdom on which you will be king and priest, enforcing God's law on your land. And you'll be self-sufficient. And you won't have a great power grid to furnish you electricity that they can cut on or cut off. You will have some sort of little energy producer, either by wind, solar power, or something else. For your own individual house, you'll have your own well, and not some utility that brings in water from 200 miles away. You'll have your own electricity. You'll have your own heat and your own power. On your own piece of land. You'll have your own kingdom right there. On land on which you'll be buried, your fathers and your children for generations to come. The day will come when the supermarket will not be there. And if a man wants to set up a little grocery business, he can do it. The supermarket that put 200 groceries out of business won't be there. The day when the million-ton tanker sales will be through. They'll be at the bottom of the ocean. The 1,000, 10,000-ton tankers that the million-ton tanker replaced, the 1,000 tankers of 100 tons, 200 tons that the 10,000-ton tanker replaced. You can go to sea today and on the great shipwrights not see a single ship for 3 and 4 or 5 days sometimes. Not one. The seas are vacant. The monopolies have it. It's ours to take back. This is the world God's given us. All we have to do is take it. That's all. The day is going to come when the 747 will fly. The great monopoly. The day will come when the self-propelled plane when the small aircraft will come back into being. They haven't produced a small plane in America in almost 50 years. Our God requires the Word made flesh. Our God, the Word made flesh, requires, come out from among them and be ye separate. And we're not alone. There are others just like us who feel the same way about it. We have Zionist separatists. They hate our guts. They hate the Mohammedans. They hate their guts. But they have one thing in common with us all. They're separatists. Their greatest enemy is not us, it's the Zionist Hindu who wants togetherness. It's a battle within Jewry. Islamic separatists are in a great war today against the Hindu separatists. The Muslim Hindus have just condemned 9 of the separatists to be executed for firing at strangers in Egypt. Christians, they don't want them there. They want their own people, they want their own land. The Zionists, they don't want Arabs there. One of them sacrificed his life to go up there and shoot down 40 defenseless Arab women and children, knowing that it would rekindle the war. He did it. He's a separatist. Today we have Christian separatists and we have Christian Hindus. The Christian Hindu, the Jewish Hindu, and the Muslim Hindu have everything in common. They are our common enemy. Our God requires separation versus integration. The Word says, and God's law prophesies, they will each turn to his own people, and each one will flee to his own land. Anyone who is found will be thrust through, and anyone who is captured will fall by the sword. The little ones will also be dashed to pieces. Isaiah 13:14 through 16. Come out from among them and be ye separate, saith the Lord. 2 Corinthians 6:17. Today is the day of our Lord. Thank you.
The preceding message by circuit riding preacher Peter Peters from the LaPorte Church of Christ, located at the base of the beautiful Colorado Rocky Mountains in LaPorte, Colorado, has been aired on the Scripture for America Worldwide Broadcasting Network and is available on CD or DVD and is archived at the website scripturesforamerica.org. Remember, circuit rider, preacher, and teacher Peter Peters broadcasts live nightly from his Wyoming radio ranch, nestled in the Laramie, Wyoming River Valley. It's a working horse and cattle ranch where circuit riding preacher Dr. Peters reaches the lost sheep of the house of Israel worldwide on satellite, internet, and shortwave radio. Dial settings 5755 and 9480. Check out the 24-hour, 7 days a week web broadcasting website sfawbn.com. Scriptures for America Worldwide Broadcasting Network is made possible by the prayers and tithes of the faithful. If you want to write to Circuit Riding Preacher Peter Peters, the address is Scriptures for America, P.O. Box 766, LaPorte, Colorado 80535. Or you can visit us on the web at www.scripturesforamerica.org. The preacher will be riding back this way next week and hopes you will too.
On a hill far away stood an old rugged cross, the emblem of suffering and shame. How I love that old cross, where the dearest and best for a world of lost sinners was slain. So I'll cherish the old rugged cross till my trophies at last I lay down. I will cling to the old rugged cross and exchange it someday for a crown. Oh, that old rugged cross, so despised by the world, has a wondrous attraction for me. For the dear Lamb of God left His glory above to bear it to dark Calvary. So I'll cherish the old rugged cross till my trophies at last I lay down. I will cling to the old rugged cross and exchange it someday for a crown. Then He'll call me someday to my home far away, where His glory forever I'll share. So I'll cherish the old rugged cross till my trophies at last I lay down. I will cling to the old rugged cross and exchange it someday for a crown. I will cling to the old rugged cross and exchange it someday for a crown.
We have a free gift to give you of tremendous value, a gift that can change your life and open your eyes to the inside of world events and the present happenings in America. Listen on. You're listening to the Scriptures for America Worldwide Broadcasting Network, heard worldwide 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on satellite, at the website www.scripturesforamerica.org, and on radio. This tremendous outreach is made possible by the prayers and financial support of the faithful. If this includes you, we would like to send you this special gift of a 90-minute DVD entitled Roots, From Abraham to America. It's a part trailblazing TV program with Pastor Peters and fearless famed historian and archaeologist E. Raymond Capps, bringing history and a key to the kingdom truth that is purposely and maliciously being kept from you and your children. Truths concerning the biblical roots of the white people who settled America. In the 1960s, the question asked by a troubled generation of Caucasian children was, "Who am I?" This DVD gives the answer, backed with proofs, archaeological evidence, and maps you can get nowhere else. Get this free gift by writing to Scriptures for America, P.O. Box 766, LaPorte, Colorado, 80535. Ask for the Roots DVD. It's our way of saying thank you to those of you who support this Scriptures for America worldwide broadcasting network. Get it while you can, this free, life-changing, eye-opening, mystery-solving DVD, Roots, From Abraham to America. You have nothing to lose and only truth to gain.
Scriptures for America has a number of resources available for use by his people. In science, medicine, and technology, man has made some amazing discoveries, but the greatest discovery of our times is the identity of the Hebrew people of the Bible today. The pamphlet, The Greatest Discovery of Our Age, tells who these people are. The Greatest Discovery of Our Age also tells who the wicked ones are and points out verses that prove America is in the Bible. To order The Greatest Discovery of Our Age, please send $6 to Scriptures for America, Post Office Box 766, LaPorte, Colorado 80535. Or you may go online to scripturesforamerica.org. You may call the Radio Ranch at area code 307-742-7582. Email preacher@sfaw.org. Order your copy today of The Greatest Discovery of Our Age.